Hello, my name is Deborah and welcome to The Edit by DH. Welcome to another episode of the Dee Unedited series. This is episode 3, part 1, and it is all things about health. Part 1 will be about myself, as always, and talking specifically about invisible health, and part 2 will be all about visible health, where I will have a very special guest. Funnily enough, I normally tend to film part 1 first and then part 2 with the guest, but this time around it was sort of the opposite. Life got in the way, and if you guys saw one of my latest posts on Instagram, you may have seen that I spoke very openly about mental health and just not feeling my best. In honesty, I am still not feeling my best, and I did ponder as to whether I should film this episode, do this podcast, but then I thought to myself, you know what, it's kind of relevant to how I'm feeling and the symptoms that I've faced as a result of stress. So that's why I decided to film anyway. So before I get started, I just want to explain very clearly that I'm not a medical professional and that anything I discuss on this episode is purely based on my opinions and experiences. So please don't treat this as like some medical journal or, scientific research. Obviously, it is based on my factual experiences, and I have done some reading or research into these things and have spoken to actual medical professionals. It doesn't mean that this is something that you should base a diagnosis on or anything like that. So if you do have any concerns or questions following this, feel free to ask me. But I would also highly recommend going to see and getting a second opinion from an actual medical professional. Today, I decided to speak a little bit about stresses, mental health, also autoimmune conditions as a result of stress, and also chronic fatigue syndrome, etc. So there's an interlinking of all these things, but I kind of just want to start at the beginning. I was diagnosed in 2020, so literally at the height of the pandemic, with a condition called Kikuchi's disease. It's an illness or a condition that I think a lot of people still aren't very aware of, and I think that's very apparent when I go to see doctors and GPs in the UK, general practitioners, where I will very casually mention Kikuchi's disease and they don't even know what it is. So often I find myself sitting there and spelling it for them, and they're just like Googling or looking into their medical encyclopedia to find out what it's about. And to be honest, there's very, very, very little information about Kikuchi's disease, but it is linked to an autoimmune condition. And I think it's more common in Asian women, as in my kind of Asian, and also, women I think that are in their 20s and 30s, I want to say. So how I found out about this disease was in 2020, I started having, certain symptoms of a virus, and obviously automatically assumed it was coronavirus, which it wasn't. And in fact, my lymph nodes were extremely inflamed. They came up, they were very swollen, and I had, particularly on my right side, a huge lymph node that was like the size of a golf ball. And initially, obviously, it didn't start like that. Initially, it just started as like a pea-sized lump, but then it visibly got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I was naturally concerned, contacted my GP. Initially, they just thought it might be something to do with tonsillitis, dismissed it as they normally usually do. And so I just sort of sat on it. But then I realised that I had private healthcare, thankfully. So I reached out to my private healthcare providers, and they decided to call me in and do a ultrasound scan on my lymph nodes. And I had to have this ultrasound scan done 3 times, because each time the results came back, the professionals themselves couldn't agree on the results. They couldn't agree or come to a conclusion on what was wrong with me, I guess. And as a result of that, they decided to do a biopsy on my lymph node. And when the test results came back, it turned out that I had Kikuchi's disease. And I was told from the beginning that it was like a self-limiting condition, which means that it normally like heals itself over a short period of time. So like normally 4 to 6 months, it's over and done with, it's healed, like no one's concerned. But at the same time, I think always in the back of my mind, it was like, okay, you're so confident this is what's going to happen, or it's not that serious, yet you're openly admitting that you don't know anything. And even when you Google it, and where I've Googled it, try to find out more about it, there is very, very little information out there about it because it is so rare. Even though that was in 2020 and technically I should be fully healed by now, I'm not. So normally what happens is I just have great feelings of fatigue, and I want to say it's like chronic fatigue syndrome. I feel like when I read the symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome, that's pretty much what I have. But with CFS for short, someone needs to officially diagnose you. I have been seen, and I am still being seen by a specialist, a rheumatologist, at a big hospital in the UK in London, and I'm still under their supervision, I guess. They've given me medication, it hasn't worked, and to be honest, they have been really happy with the way I've managed it myself. Imagine when you're feeling the most tired, and I feel like times it by 5 or times it by 10. I literally have no energy to do anything, and normally I'm a very proactive person. I normally hate sitting at home doing nothing, so even on my days off I'm doing something. So it's either laundry, I'm doing the washing up or hoovering the house, I'm sorting out admin for the house. I've got 101 things to do, and I'm very, very proactive person. But I know that I have these great fatigue symptoms when I literally cannot find the energy or strength to even get up to wash the dishes, for example, or put dishes away. And it's one of those situations where I know if I go out every single day, and I don't mean clubbing, I mean just like going out, having a life, going to the office, going to one appointment, going to see one friend for a brunch, I feel like if I do that for, say, like 2 consecutive days, if I try to do that for a 3rd consecutive day, I know I'm going to be exhausted. And if I don't take rest, I will get ill. Like, that's as simple as it is. So I've had to manage my lifestyle and ensure that I don't fit too many things in. So I always, when I get requests from friends or people to meet, whether it's for coffee, personal reasons, or business reasons, I just have to ensure that I space things out and be sensible with my schedule, because when I don't, trust me, I immediately regret it. And there's an example when back in 2022, I believe it was, when I moved to this new place from my old place, we had so much to throw away. We were moving from quite a big house to an apartment. So I had to declutter everything, including my parents' stuff, which they had left behind after moving to Korea, including my other half stuff from when he used to have an office at home. We needed to move so much stuff. So it was almost like I was packing and moving stuff for 5 people's equivalent. And it meant a lot of throwing away items in the skip, etc. You guys know what happens with renovations. You guys know what happens with moving house. We were downsizing considerably. So basically I ended up, I think, for 5 straight days lifting heavy stuff alongside my partner, but lifting heavy stuff, throwing things away, moving things all day. I was on my feet doing physical things, and boy did I pay for it. By the end of that week, I think I was in bed for at least 3 to 4 days. I just physically couldn't get up. I was down for the count. And even things like exercise, I didn't know how to explain it. I thought I was just being lazy. But when I spoke to the rheumatologist, he asked me, how do you feel after your exercises? So by the way, for the record, I hate the gym. I still say I'm allergic to the gym, but I love dancing, and I used to do Zumba. And he used to ask me, how do you feel after Zumba, which is obviously considered an intensive workout. And I said, I'm fine during the workout, but afterwards I feel like I need to lie down for the rest of the day. And he said to me, well, that's your body's way of saying that's too much for you. And really, with your condition, you shouldn't be doing intensive exercises. And really, you shouldn't really be doing more than 20 minutes workout. And really, you should be doing low impact, low intensity exercises, including walking or yoga or Pilates. So that's when I sort of switched up and decided to give up my beloved Zumba. But going back a bit, I kind of want to explain how this all came about. So, or my theory on how it came about. So 2020, there was a lot going on. Obviously, the pandemic itself was enough to stress anybody out and add huge levels of burden, anxiety, stress, some people depression. I know it impacted a lot of people's mental health, as it did mine. But at the time, we were also in the middle of planning my parents' move to Korea, and it meant that I was heavily involved in helping a lot, being the only child. So there was a lot of work in relation to that. And then we were obviously trying to survive with our business as well, because our business, we're self-employed. So imagine with the pandemic and the way that the companies are structured, it meant that we weren't getting any financial assistance from the government. We didn't have some company to fall back on and, accept furlough. So we were really in a financial, it wasn't even like a difficult place. It was more like a scary place, because it was that uncertainty and being like, right, we need to rely on ourselves. And our type of business that we're in, the industry that we're in, it was like one of the worst industries to be in during the pandemic. There was a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety because of the uncertainty for the future. In addition to everything else, we were having ongoing issues with neighbours, and that issue had been a long-term problem. Neighbours who lived either side of us, and especially the neighbours on the left, they were very, very, very antisocial, constantly doing something to be antisocial. We were the only people that were really like standing up for ourselves on the road that we lived on, and as a result we became like the target of these neighbours. It meant that I was getting death threats personally. Twice I received death threats, twice at least, if not more. I remember calling the police on my neighbours, threats to kill me, threats to smash my head in, quote for quote. And it was just so stressful, because your home should be your haven, and it really wasn't at the time. I remember feeling so anxious when I was at home. I would jump every time there was a loud noise outside my house. Even leaving my house, I would always have anxiety. Even if my other half left the house, I would feel anxious that he might be ganged upon or attacked. They were literally just sponging off the government and having parties day after day after day and being loud and obnoxious about it. And then me and my other half were just trying to survive, trying to work, but like we couldn't even open the windows to make business calls, because even like during the peak heat summer times, heat waves, just because the next door neighbours were having parties. And all of these things, we ended up going into mediation, and I just found like the authorities were just completely and utterly useless. I felt very helpless. I felt very much like no one was understanding us, and it was such a stressful time. Even just thinking about it now, it makes me feel like short of breath, because it brings me back to those times where I was very on edge, very anxiety ridden, etc. And during the pandemic, even though everyone had their own stresses and anxieties going on, with the East and Southeast Asian community, we particularly faced an extra burden and extra anxiety because of the increased racism and attacks towards our community. So during that time, again, I will make this a separate episode, but just to briefly touch upon it, because it's all linked, normally I'm not that person that likes confrontation, but if somebody confronts me, I can stand up for myself. But I remember at that time I was so anxiety ridden of like not wanting to leave the house just in case someone spat at me, or just in case someone called me names, and then how would I react, and would it get into a physical altercation, or in case somebody sprayed me with disinfectant, in case somebody was racist to me, in case somebody was violent or racist towards my loved ones like my mum or my other half. So there was so many anxieties. And by the way, the examples that I've given about like being sprayed with disinfectant, spat on, acids, those attacks were happening in real time at the time when the pandemic was rife. And I remember as a result not leaving my house for 5 months, and that's never happened to me. Yes, I'm a homebody. Yes, I do have social anxiety, but it's never been to the point where I couldn't leave my house for 5 months. And I mean, I didn't leave my house for 5 months. Not to go to the post office, not to go for a food shop. If any food shops or anything like that needed to be done, it was my other half that was doing it. or we would get deliveries. So it was a really, really tough time and a very, very dark time for me. And luckily I had some great friends who were trying to, help me out of it and trying to get me to leave my house. They were like offering to come to my house where it was legally allowed, where you were allowed to do like socially distanced walks together in the park. But I didn't even want to do that in case I bumped into like someone on the street and they were aggressive, whether verbally or physically. Just so many things. And at that time, my health just gradually started to deteriorate. And like I said, it started with that sort of like virus-like symptom. And I was very, very under the weather. And I just assumed that I'd be fine. But like I said, they did all these tests, including the ultrasound scan, including the biopsy. And then it came back as Kikuchi disease. And at the time, I thought, well, I'm going to ride it out and hopefully I'll be better soon, because that's what they kept telling me. We don't know anything about this virus, but or this condition, but you'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine. And fast forward 3 years in 2023, I'm not fine. And I'm still having to manage myself. And that's why I feel like I do potentially have chronic fatigue syndrome. I actually have a follow-up call with the rheumatologist next week. So I will speak to them further about it. But if Kikuchi's disease is an illness that only lasts potentially 4 to 6 months, then why am I still feeling crap and having to feel like I'm living almost a limited lifestyle to this day, 3 years on? I know for a fact that stress definitely caused it, and is a big part of why I wanted to talk about this, because I feel like stress is a major cause for so many illnesses. Obviously, stress can cause mental illness, stress can cause autoimmune illnesses, stress can lead to cancers. I feel like stress can be the cause of many different things, including weight gain, etc., etc., etc. I looked into it and I was looking at it's an American website, but it's the National Library of Medicine. And it does talk about how stress can be a trigger of autoimmune diseases. How you get an autoimmune disease is like normally genetics. The environment, your hormone, immunological factors, they're all considered important in autoimmune diseases or the development of them. Apparently, at least 50% of autoimmune disorders have been attributed to unknown trigger factors, and physical and psychological stress have been implicated in the development of these said diseases. Unfortunately, not only does stress cause disease, but the disease itself also causes significant stress in the patients, creating a vicious cycle. And I've definitely found that with my own illness. And it's only when I was referred to this specialist, to this rheumatologist, he explained to me so casually, because obviously, I don't know if it's the same in every country, I'm assuming it is. If you have lived in one country for most of your life, like I have, I was born and raised in London, then generally the National Health Service should have a backlog, a history of all your health conditions from birth, really. So when my rheumatologist looked up my health history, he's like, oh, you have a history of autoimmunity. And I was like, sorry, do I? Okay, I wasn't aware of that, because obviously I knew I have Kikuchi's disease or was diagnosed with it in 2020, but over 10 years ago I had a really severe case of alopecia where I lost hair, and hair loss can be varying for different people, for different individuals, but in my case I had so much hair loss to the point where it impacted my self-esteem so much. And you don't realize how important or meaningful something is until you lose it. And I remember once showering and clumps of my hair were coming out, and like obviously hair comes out for me all the time, to the point where I sometimes scare myself, where I get loads like clumps of hair, and then I'm like, ooh, and then I realize it's like just my hair in the bin, or after a shower in the plug hole. But the thing is, there are like normal amounts that you expect consistently, but at this particular time, the amount of hair that fell out, just something in my stomach was like panicking, and I was like talking to myself, Deborah, don't panic, like it's fine, it's just maybe you didn't brush your hair and therefore it's a little bit more clumpy and tangled, and you just like try and reassure yourself in so many ways. And then I remember after showering I like brushed my hair and more clumps were coming out, and then I'm like, okay, great, what the hell, like I'm panicking more. So then I basically like flicked my hair to one side, and I remember I had this like bald patch, and it was smooth. It wasn't even like stubbly or anything. It was smooth, like bald patch. I remember panicking and speaking to an ex about it, because I was with an ex partner at the time, and he was like, oh, you'll be fine, I'm sure it's nothing, it'll grow back. But it was the opposite. It got worse and worse and worse, and again I had like clumps. In the end, I think I had about 5 massive bald patches, and my self-esteem was at rock bottom, because like England is a very windy country. And I remember like what I had left of hair was very thin, and I would comb it, but like the second that it's windy, which is like most of the time in the UK, my hair would blow and you would see the bald patches. And you know when like, even if no one's looking, which I'm sure they were, but even if no one's looking, the way your psychological state of mind is at the time, especially when you're feeling very conscious or vulnerable, is you feel like the whole world is staring at you, pointing the finger at you, laughing at you, talking about you. So I was so stressed, more so because of the alopecia. And I remember going to see a doctor, and they were like, it's probably because of stress, you just need to stop being stressed. As if that's like so easy, we would all just stop doing it, right? But I remember at the time I was working still in social services. I was very stressed. I had a very intense workload. I feel like every single social child, especially children and family social worker, has a very heavy caseload. And honestly, I give so much respect to children and family social workers, because I've been in that industry and I know how tough it is. So you're stressed anyway. But I also at the time was involved with doing like independent assessments, where my company was like paying me as like a freelancer to do assessments of foster carers and potential adoptive parents. So I was doing that on the weekend, as well as training. I was conducting training to prospective foster carers and so on and so forth, as well as like looking after university students who were doing placements with us. So it was a lot. I think I was being overworked far too much, because I was just at the time just wanting to soak up as much experience as I could, and I got alopecia as a result. So this GP was like, you need to stop being stressed. Helpful. And then they gave me these tablets, and I think they kind of had some iron in it and other things, and she was like, it's probably going to make you constipated, it's probably going to make your stools black, and there's no guarantee it's going to work, but you can try it out. And I was like, sounds wonderful. And literally took the tablets, had no effect on me other than the negative side effects, which she said it would, like the constipation and the darkened stools. So in the end, my mum had my aunt send me some like multivitamins from Korea, and I swear within like a couple of, I want to say 6 months to a year, but very quickly I noticed my hair was slowly growing back, but within a certain time period it grew back fully. And touch wood, it has been there, like I've had hair since, whereas because normally with alopecia it can be reoccurring, so just because your hair grows back doesn't mean that you won't lose it again. So that's something I've always been very conscious of. But yeah, I always knew alopecia was a thing, and I've obviously been through it, but it wasn't until this rheumatologist told me, oh, alopecia is also a form of an autoimmune condition, that I realized that there was a link there. Furthermore, I have like on my arm, so instead of being like straight or round, it goes inwards. And everyone who sees my arm, because both my arms are different, this one's just like a bit chunky and this one goes in, so anyone who sees my left arm, they think that it's a bicep, and they're like, oh, you must really work out when they see this arm. And I'm like, no. So when I was a kid, again, I think my mum noticed a lump on my neck and took me to the GP. Then the GPs like did a few tests, did a biopsy, even to the point where I went to like a specialist children's hospital in the UK, which is called the Great Ormond Children's Hospital. They then told me I had something called so it was like it's a muscle wasting condition. So as a result, my muscle wasted here. Luckily, that's all that happened. And even my armpit now, it's not the same. So it, like, you know, an armpit's normally like smooth like this, whereas I've got like an inner crevice in my armpit. It doesn't hurt or anything, and it's never come back to its normal shape, if that makes sense. And again, I just thought like, oh, I never really thought of anything of it. I just thought, because it wasn't affecting me in my teen or even adult years, so I just thought, well, it is what it is. But it's, again, only when I spoke to this rheumatologist, because no doctor's ever really taken time to sit there and explain things to me, and he did, because obviously he's a specialist, and he was like, even the atrophy is a form of an autoimmune condition, so really like all your life you've had it. And it blew my mind, because I was like, wow, okay, I genuinely didn't know. So anyway, like I said, the last thing I was diagnosed with was the Kikuchi's disease, but I honestly feel like I have something else. If not chronic fatigue syndrome, I have something else. And when I look at like chronic fatigue syndrome, like CFS, I'll just say, I just read the symptoms of it. And for example, just to give an idea based of what the NHS website says, it says you're feeling extremely tired all the time. You may find it very hard to do daily activities. That's me. Still feeling tired after resting or sleeping. That's me. Taking a long time to recover after physical activity. Problems sleeping, such as waking up often during the night. Problems with thinking, memory and concentration. Then other things are like muscle or joint pain, headaches, sore throats, flu-like symptoms, feeling dizzy or sick, and then fast or irregular heartbeats. It says in order to treat this, you can either do CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, energy management, and then medicine. And then causes of chronic fatigue syndrome, by the way, which they also categorize alongside ME, can be viral infections such as glandular fever, bacterial infections such as pneumonia, problems with the immune system, a hormone imbalance, and your genes. And again, like, I don't really know whether it's genetic or not, because on my mum's side, she doesn't have anything like this as far as I'm aware. But my dad's side, you guys may or may not know if you've been following me for a while, I don't have a relationship with my dad. So I know nothing historically health-wise about my dad's side and his family. So who knows, maybe it's genetic and from my father's side, but I will never know. Needless to say, stress also impacts mental health. And that can affect your energy as well, your low moods, feelings of anxiety, depression, sadness in general. And I remember when I spoke to a nutritionalist some time ago, she even said like stress is a massive thing. It's so easy to say manage your stress, don't get stressed, but there's a reason that medical professionals do say it, because stress can actually be a killer, quite literally. And she said, try to reduce stress as it emits hormones and neurotransmitters. It can have a detrimental effect on your immune system or can make it go into overdrive, which can cause autoimmunity. So she said, find an hour each day, preferably before bedtime, to have me time. That doesn't involve a phone, TV, a device in general. So this could be an hour for reading, an hour where you just have a bath and just relax and put a candle on. And the reason why she said don't use a device like a phone or whatever is because it's got blue light, which is bad for cortisol. I remember hearing this, and it's like you hear these things and you know it's true, but it's like one thing to hear it and one thing to be like, okay, from now on I'm not going to be stressed, which is near impossible. I think what helps, these are my practical tips that work for me, and I, like I said, it might not work for you, and like I said, I'm not a medical professional, but I hope that by me saying this and talking about this, it might get you thinking about the kind of lifestyle that you lead, and understanding how much stress can impact not only like our mental health but our physical health. And also, if there is some kind of practical advice that I can give based off my experiences, then hopefully it will be helpful to even just one of you out there who is listening to this now. For me, the number one thing that I think does not help with stress and mental health is social media. So I think you need to learn to recognize when you are in that zone. So if you know you're in that zone of depression, of anxiety, of stress and whatnot, I would just highly recommend staying off social media. Because like I said in my one of my latest posts, like you end up playing the comparison game where you see beautiful models, tall, skinny, legs for days, 6-pack, 8-pack, 10-pack, and you're comparing it to yourself. And especially, like, I often feel like this where I have really low self-esteem, especially since the pandemic, especially since this diagnosis, where I've been able to do less physical activities, and then I found my weight creeping up. And you guys know, if you're similar to me, where you're like mid-30 plus, you know, at some point your metabolism really messes with you, and they're like, see ya. And then you're literally left like, I had one banana and it's literally now stuck to my hip. I'm exaggerating, but and it's very hard to lose weight. And especially when I wasn't doing as much physical activity, I found I was gaining a lot of weight. And then you're looking at these pictures, like I said, with these beautiful models, and you're like, damn, feeling even worse about yourself. Or it could be a material thing where you see like wonderful houses that you're not living in, or like, all these wonderful items that you don't own, or a perceived perfect relationship. These couples that do these memes and they're doing romantic things through each other, and it's like not really realistic sometimes. And then again, you might compare it to your partner, who might be at that moment like scratching his ass and doing nothing, and you know what I mean. It's like, it's so easy to play the comparison game. As a content creator, when I'm feeling crap, I have low energy, and all day I've only been able to lay in bed, I've got my glasses on, I feel rough, I look rough, and then I see someone like blogging this amazing, content, and it's just like content after content after content after content, and the voice in my head's like, you should be doing this. But then I don't have the energy to do it, and by not doing it, I just feel terrible for not doing it, and feel guilty and awful and like I'm rubbish. It's constant vicious cycles. So that's why I feel like stay off social media. Whether it's Instagram, I think Instagram's the worst for it, TikTok, YouTube, just stay off it. Unless with YouTube you want to watch videos that, make you feel good or uplift your spirits. Otherwise, I would just stay off social media. That's my number one advice. My number two advice is literally to take each day at a time. I think the more pressure you put on yourself, the worse it gets. So instead of being like, okay, I feel like crap like today, but tomorrow I'm going to do XYZ, and then tomorrow comes, you don't do XYZ, and then you feel even worse because you're like, damn, I wasted yesterday and I wasted today. And I think instead, just be like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on today. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. And if you're that kind of person like me, where you feel you've accomplished something by doing tasks, instead of like being unrealistic and setting up 10 tasks and feeling crap about yourself, even just getting one thing done, it could be something so minor, emptying the dishes from the dishwasher, or folding the dried clothes from the laundry rack, whatever it may be. Treat that as an accomplishment and just be happy that you've done something for the day, if that makes sense. But I would definitely say take each day as it comes. And then also learn what makes you feel good and happy. So for example, is it reading? Is it having a bath? What relaxes you? For me, it's singing. And I love singing. And a lot of people sing when they're happy, but I think I've mentioned this before. I sing when I'm sad, or I sing when I'm feeling reflective. So literally I have a mic at home. It's so sad. I literally think I'm Adele or something. And I just get out the mic, and when I'm home alone, I just like to sing. And sometimes my husband's there, but I like to sing. And I tend to sing sad songs. I tend to sing ballads. I tend to sing Adele. I tend to sing, you name it. I sing lots of things, and I generally at the end of it I feel a little bit better, not like necessarily happier, but like de-stressed. Sometimes I might just be like putting on a good movie, something, especially try not to watch anything that's all gloom and doom when you're feeling rubbish. Try to watch something maybe like funny that you enjoy watching. It might be like the millionth rewatch of the Friends episode, or it could be a movie that's like a comedy. Like I personally love Bridesmaids. I just think it's hilarious. So whatever movie it may be, just put on a movie and snack. And sometimes in the past I've had this thing where I watch a movie and I'll snack, and I feel guilty for snacking because I'm like, want to lose weight, and I'm sat here snacking like an obese whale. But then I was like, no, forget that. I'm gonna snack. I'm gonna enjoy this time. I'm just gonna relax, and then in a few days time, when I'm feeling better, when I'm in a better mental space, then I will focus on eating like lentils or whatever I need to eat to be healthier. But for now, it's about me, and I'm just going to relax. I definitely recommend cuddles. I really recommend cuddles. If there's someone you like cuddling, cuddle them, whether that's your mum, your grandma, your granddad, your brother, your sister, your best mate, your other half, whoever it may be, your kids, your dog, You know, they might find it bloody annoying, but cuddle the crap out of them. Cuddling, I think, is so good. It just releases, I think, endorphins. I feel like it helps to de-stress. And especially if it's somebody that you genuinely love, you genuinely find yourself feeling safe with them, and, you know, you enjoy their company, you know, get a cuddle in. Honestly, it really, really helps. On a more serious note as well, if you really feel like you're trying so many different things and you're still in a dark space and you can't get out of it, I would highly, highly, highly recommend seeing a professional, even if it's just like for one session to have a consultation, like a therapist. And I feel like for those who haven't had a therapist or the right therapist, hearing the word therapist, it immediately just sounds clinical. It just immediately sounds like, oh, I need help, there's something wrong with me, I'm a failure. But those are all wrong, and it's quite the opposite. By speaking to someone when you need help, you're saying, I'm acknowledging that I'm not okay and I might need help, yes, but to better myself. Also, I'm taking the first step to improve myself and give myself more strength and courage. It takes so much bravery to seek professional support, and there's strength in that, there's courage in that, so don't feel like it's cowardly, because it's quite the opposite. Because I'm also Christian, I feel like praying really helps me, and I know people meditate, I know people do all sorts of things for that they might find similar, but I feel like there's nothing quite like praying for me, because I am a religious person, and for me, I find so much strength in praying. And I know that in the past where I've prayed about things, I feel like my prayers have been answered, and that gives me so much courage again and strength to just kind of face the day and face tomorrow, you know, and face next week and face people or face situations, if you know what I mean. If you feel like you need alone time, you have alone time. If you feel you want company and need support, reach out to people around you that make you feel good, that make you feel secure. And I, on that note, want to just thank everybody that reached out to me, whether on the comment or privately messaged me, to just send me a message of well wishes, and, you know, telling me that you guys are there if I need you. I really, really, really appreciate it. It actually made me feel more emotional, but in a really nice way. And to know that, like, I genuinely just put that post out there. It's like, it wasn't like I was looking for attention or even like support. I just wanted to be honest with how I was feeling, and I just put it out there thinking maybe like one or two people might message me. But to receive the messages that I got, it was so encouraging, and I just want to thank everybody who reached out during that time. I'm still not 100% okay, but that's okay. It's okay not to be okay, is the moral of the story. I think it's understanding what impacts you, what acts as a trigger, and then understanding what helps you feel happy and relaxes you, and looking after yourself a little bit more. Self-care, self-love is very, very important as well. So, like I said, this is part 1 where I'm talking about invisible health, but part 2 will be about physical health, and I already have a very special guest who I've already filmed with, so I'll be releasing that video very, very soon as well. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and I really, really hope that you guys are taking good care of yourselves. If you need to talk, you know, I hope that I'm going to be good enough to reach out to. So if you need any kind of advice, or just want to have a chit chat, or an ear you want to borrow about something or another, I am here. My DMs are open as always. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and take care.